Hi, welcome to this presentation on the IOEF framework, the Intuitive OpenEdge framework. And today we are focusing on the new REST edition. We're just going to do a quick overview of its functionality. So this originally was designed to be a single endpoint for all client types, whether a Java class or a .NET class or a OpenEdge client itself. It was originally written to run on the Classic App server. In recent years, we've been running against PASOE. Some of the great things about this framework, which hopefully I will be able to illustrate clearly, is the code standardization, better record scoping, no record block issues in production. All that stuff is done through the dataset handling. It really lends itself to rapid development because a lot of the redundant coding is managed for you by the framework. I've seen rewrites reduce the code as much as 70%. Finally, it's a secure platform. PASOE runs on Tomcat web server, and of course, it supports Spring. The framework itself also has built-in nonce management at the application layer. So here's kind of what the model has looked like. The most recent addition is the REST API, but this framework has been used with OpenEdge as a client. It's also been used with a Java client and a .NET client. For this presentation, we are going to focus on the REST API. The thing I really love about this REST API is the Swagger document itself is static at its core level. The base part of each respective URI allows you to query the API to find out what is there, what it looks like, what the input and output parameters are, what the criteria is of grabbing data from data sets or queries. There are basically four base URIs. One is the CRUD, which is all your data access. There is also the ability to call any method within a class that you decide to expose. Again, that's all queryable. And then the queries are just another subset of data sets that are read-only, a little bit different management of how they are accessed. And then the session themselves, the post is the authentication to initialize your session. It gives you your token or your nonce. The delete session, of course, just ends your session. Of course, the lifespan of an inactive session is completely configurable. Let's walk through some of the APIs. Let's talk about the authentication and some of the queries. First thing we're going to do is log in to the server, and I am going to fail with the wrong password. We have a standard format of our payloads to go to and from the server, and I've failed. I am going to now authenticate with the right password, and we should get a message saying, yes, we have successfully logged on as McMite. Now that we're in here, I want to quickly show you the API section where you are actually able to query. We have a contained string of customer, and this will bring back all the CRUD data sets containing the string cust. And so I only have one. If you see down here, we've got a count of one. These are all the fields and all the information about the fields. Each field is accounted for in the data set. The next thing we're going to do is query all the customer query objects. So these are things that are queryable. We've got the customers object. It tells us what query selection fields are available and what the requirements are, as well as the operators. It's also got customer orders and a return of 2 entities. Now we're going to just query what classes there are available to call and their methods. Query stuff that's got IO in it. So I have a method name of IO parameter test. It's in the CLS Open Test IT class. And these are all the parameters, data types, and whether they're input or output or both. And it also gives a method return value if it does return a value and what the data type is. There is actually another one called add numbers. And again, in the same class, it's add numbers. It has a list of numbers as an input parameter, has an output parameter of a decimal, has an output parameter of dollar text, and it has a return value of a character. So I'm going to end my session. And now if I try and run my query again, I will get a message saying that my session may have expired. We can also look at this being run from a browser. So I have this application called Big Boy Sports. And if I click on the customers, I go right to the login screen because I'm not authenticated yet. So again, if I put in some incorrect authentication, I get the same message back that we saw in Insomnia. If I log in, I'm good to go, and I can get to my customer screen. Let's look at querying a CRUD object. What this metadata shows us is the rules for updating the customer in this case. What fields are required. This is for the developer to query at development time, but also it actively runs these rules at runtime. We do have metadata in this definition that tells us how the server is going to behave. Let's look at the name field. Minimum size to be written is, for example, if you had to have a minimum of 2 or 3 characters, you could set that value here. The most important thing here is that it is a required field. So when you do commit this record, it's going to look at this metadata and say, hey, we need to have this value. So let's drill into the query of customers. We have several fields here. We're going to focus on the 3 query fields. We don't really need to talk about the ID. Of course, that's queryable as well. But let's look at the name field, for example. We can do a begins. We can do an equals. We want a minimum of 3 characters to query this field. The idea here is that we want to be able to protect the API from taxing the database. So we want this to be configurable based on the use case. At the top level, we have num query fields required. That means that one of these fields must be satisfied in order for the query to execute. Finally, let's look at a method called add numbers. It has an input parameter of parameter name number list. It also has an output parameter of decimal value. It has an output parameter called $text, and it also returns a character as well. So when we run this method, we've got a comma delimited list of numbers. We can simply run this, and it adds up the numbers and gives us several representations of the total number. Let's look at the Query Customers API with 3 different interfaces executing the same code. First, we'll use the REST tester. I'll send this request with 2 characters. Remember, we have a requirement of 3. I'm going to run this. I get the error saying incomplete query selection. On the browser application, the validation has been put into the client side because the developer actually queried the requirements for the API and based on that decided to put in that validation on the client side. So we type in AB, we hit return, and we get the client side validation. We don't see the actual server message. In the window version, we have no validation. I type in AB and we should see the server side message, which we do. When I complete this, in all interfaces, we get complete lists. So let's type in ABC, send the request, and we get 3 results. ABC on the window version, we get 3 results. And ABC on the browser version, we get results. Now let's look at updating a customer. So the first thing we're going to do is perform our get, and we're looking at customer 3425, which is ABC Sports. And there is the record for ABC Sports. And we're going to change the name of ABC Sports to ABC Sports 2. Now remember, this put actually is doing a patch. So if you do not send the field, it will not update the field. So the expectation here is that we will just be updating the name and that's it. So we send that and we get confirmation that the name has come back. If I query this customer again, you see the name is changed, query it here, it's changed there, query it here, and it's changed here. So we know that we are updating the same data. I'm going to drill into this with the browser screen. So we see that we have ABC Sports, and we're going to change it to 3. Save it here, query it here. We have 3. Query it here, we have 3. Thanks for watching, and please check out our other videos on the Intui-Tech channel. Nice and easy.